Welcome to Disability Access in Action, a production brought to you by the City of Boston's Disabilities Commission. I'm Colleen Flanagan, the Outreach and Engagement Specialist for the City of Boston's Disabilities Commission, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's episode that is all about city planning and development. On today's show, we're going to speak with Caitlin Coppinger, the Deputy Director of Comprehensive Planning for the City of Boston's Planning Department, who will discuss with Commissioner McCosh, the city's Disabilities Commissioner and ADA Title II Coordinator, about what planning and development means for residents and how you can get involved in your neighborhood. So, without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Commissioner McCosh to take it away about this very interesting conversation about planning and development.
Thanks, Colleen. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Disability Access in Action. Today's conversation will be very interesting. It's all about how people with disabilities can get involved in development and planning in their neighborhoods. My guest is Caitlin Coppinger from the Boston Planning Department. I'd like to welcome Caitlin and ask her to tell us a little bit about herself and her role with the Planning Department. Welcome, Caitlin.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me today. As they had just said, my name is Caitlin Coppinger, and I'm the Deputy Director of Comprehensive Planning. I've been with the City of Boston's Planning Department, or formerly the Boston Planning Development Agency, now for about 5 years, in a number of different roles, which I'm excited to talk about a lot of different things, and which is why everyone thought that I would be a great person to come on and chat about all the things that the BPDA or the Planning Department actually does. I started off here as a project manager in development review, reviewing projects that are 15 units or 20,000 square feet or above, and really looking at our affordable housing and portfolio, making sure those projects get reviewed in a light that are best for all people. After that, I moved into being a housing manager, overseeing the inclusionary development policy, making sure that our income restricted units get filled with people who are income qualified, and make sure that developers are meeting kind of the goals that they set in their development review process. And then for the last 2 years, I've been the Deputy Director of Comprehensive Planning, overseeing our kind of long-term and short-term planning efforts here at the city. So very excited to be here.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a lot about housing developments, the work you do there, but can you give us a sense of what planning is in general? Like, what does it cover? Obviously, large housing developments, but like, just talk us through what the planning department actually works on.
Yeah, there's a lot that we actually do. So the Boston Planning Department, it's part of the City of Boston's actual planning cabinet. It helps guide how Boston kind of grows and changes over time. This team really creates a long-term plan for neighborhoods and the city as a whole, and it kind of manages both the zoning code, which I'm happy to get into in a little bit later. We review major development projects, so anything that is kind of that 15-unit threshold or bigger. We oversee a lot of city-owned land and make sure that it gets disposed of and redeveloped, mostly for affordable housing or other types of development that you see specifically in Charlestown or the Seaport and stuff like that. At the core of our work, it's really balancing kind of new development with community needs, and both with good design and goals around equity, sustainability, and resiliency. The department really works closely with residents, businesses, community groups, and other agencies on land use, housing. Again, urban design, we want to make sure that everything looks great and kind of matches with the existing context within different neighborhoods, and economic development to kind of shape Boston's future. So kind of what we really do falls into a bunch of different categories. Planning for the future. So we create neighborhood and citywide plans that look at housing, transportation, open space, and economic development. We do zoning code updates. That is the actual kind of land use laws that tell you what you can and cannot do with a piece of property. And we want to maintain that. And part of the thing that we're doing is modernizing the zoning code so we can have new development follow clear rules for use, size, and design. Currently, it's a very complicated and antiquated process, and the majority of things don't actually follow what's written in the rules right now. We do review major projects, which is called Article 80, which most people may have heard called it through that process rather than a small or large project review. So that's when we evaluate large development proposals to make sure that they're well designed and aligned with the code, and within city goals if we do have a planning process that has gone on in that area. We make sure that they're affordable, accessible, and if they're in places that do need resiliency infrastructure, which we do have a lot of those places across the city, that they're both planning for that type of future. And that happens through our urban design team, who really encourage high quality, inclusive design in new buildings and make sure that the public realm kind of matches that. Again, we do manage public land, so we oversee the Boston Planning Development Agency's portfolio. The majority of that you would see in the Marine Park, in Roxbury, in parts of Dorchester, and in Charlestown. And we do a lot of community engagement. We have a whole team that works directly with communities and stakeholders to kind of gather input, build trust, get to know folks, make sure that we can go out to them and talk to people about what they want outside of kind of our regulatory processes. But at the end of the day, the Boston Planning Department really plays a key role in shaping the city's built environment and really want to help Boston meet today's needs while planning thoughtfully for the future.
Great. Thank you for that really big picture overview. So I guess I'm understanding that the planning department does a whole lot. Everything from planning buildings and land use to developing projects to watching the projects get built and then hopefully some community benefits. So can we just break it down a little bit just to make it a little bit more understandable because it is very complicated. But we really want people with disabilities to understand the process so that they can get involved each step along the way. So first, let's talk about planning, because planning is different than development and it's different than building. So can you talk us through, like at a very kind of like a baseline level of detail, what the planning process is? I'm assuming this is the first step. Like if there's an empty lot in a neighborhood, you'll start with the planning process. So how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll talk through both what is planning and what is development. So planning really is the process of working with communities, and we'll take a different type of size of land. So we do this either on a corridor or through squares and streets if people have been through that process and just kind of your neighborhood commercial center, or we're doing plans in neighborhood-wide places like the Allston Brighton Community Plan right now. So it really can look different either from a parcel of land all the way up through kind of a neighborhood or a citywide plan. But that's the process of working with communities to kind of define and codify their goals and visions for the future through plans, zoning, design standards, and community priorities like housing, affordability, building scale, open space, transportation, all these different things. They're translated into a clear plan that then once a development project wants to move forward, we can rely on this plan to say, this is what the community wants, and this is what we would want to see on this specific parcel of land when it does come forward.
So this is a really important point for people with disabilities or anybody really to weigh in when they're working on planning. And how long does a planning process typically take?
Yeah, that's a great question. We try not to use up too much of people's times. In a perfect world, I think we would say about 9 to 12 months. On some of the larger projects, it could take a couple of years. If we're doing a citywide plan, sometimes it could take a little bit longer than that.
During this process, how do you advertise like opportunities, and what are the opportunities for people to give input? Are there meetings? Is there like online place to submit comments?
Yeah, we like to do both in-person and online meetings for planning processes. The best way to stay up to date on all of this is to sign up for the Boston Planning Department newsletter. You can sign up for citywide updates, and you can also sign up for your specific neighborhood updates as well. So you'll get emails saying that there's going to be public meetings coming up. Those meetings will either be in Zoom or in person or hybrid. We try to do an abundance of all three, just so people have many different opportunities to participate. We also will have threshold languages in each of those neighborhoods. So if you do not speak English, we generally have, by request, we'll have interpreters and translators at the majority of these meetings. So that's the best way to get involved.
Is there also a place you can submit comments online if people are too busy to come to a meeting?
Yes. When there's an open comment period, that does not necessarily mean that we don't want to still hear from you, but there's generally going to be a portal on that actual project link for you to actually submit comments. Generally on the project pages as well, there will be the point of contact of the project manager. And if, say, the comment period may not be open, but the process is still going on, feel free to email the project manager your comment. They want to hear from you to be able to just understand, what are you thinking? There's never a time that we're not willing to hear from you.
That's incredible. And I actually didn't even know that there was a neighborhood sign up option. So I'm going to do that because I know I live in South Boston, and there's so much development happening throughout the city and in my neighborhood. So I'm understanding now that the development, the planning process could be anything from like a whole stretch. Like I remember there was like Plan Dorchester Avenue, I think. Yeah. And then also the planning department would oversee maybe just like one building. If a building's going up in the Seaport, yeah. Or if you live in the North End and there's a major building going up and you want to know, hey, like what's going on with that? Is it going to be accessible? What is there going to be parking? You could go to meetings just on that one development or on the whole stretch of a certain section of the city. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. And going to both of these processes is very important because when we do actually have that plan, when a development project comes forward, we can refer back to all of the goals and the things that we've heard from community in these plans to be able to make sure that they're implemented on a development project. Yeah. So that's our goal is for, not to take up too much of your time, but if you really want to say like, hey, these are my priorities in South Boston. So to say, if we start doing a planning process there and then a project comes forward, we have this codified and it's put into a plan that we then can refer back to when we review these kind of large projects.
That is so incredible to know. And I really want to encourage our viewers to get involved because this is going to shape Boston for the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years. So we really want your voices heard, especially if you have a disability or concern about accessibility in the neighborhood. We really want you to either come out to a meeting in person, on Zoom, or submit comments. Okay, so once the planning process is done, then we get into development. Can you just talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So development is really when that project comes forward. It's how that vision is carried out kind of on the ground in a specific parcel. So say there's an empty lot in your neighborhood and someone wants to bring forward an actual project. That is what development is. Developers propose and build individual projects that must comply with plans and zoning. And that review process is established through what's called the zoning code in Article 80. So kind of the key difference is that planning really codifies community's vision in a plan and development implements it project by project.
That is super clear. So talking about zoning, I know that my staff goes to zoning board of appeal meetings because it seems like there are a lot of them because when someone wants to make a new building, it may not fit in the zoning code. And I know Boston's zoning code is very old and very complicated, like you said. So I know Mayor Wu has made a commitment to reform Boston's zoning code. Can you talk a little bit about what the zoning code is, how it impacts development, and what the changes that we're implementing may be?
That's a great intro to what it is. It's old, antiquated, and it's broken. So zoning reform is really kind of about fixing a zoning code that's outdated, it's overly complicated. It really makes it harder than it actually should be for people to make reasonable improvements to their own homes or their parcels of land that they may have. So over decades, the code has become kind of a patchwork of old rules, exceptions, and neighborhood-specific provisions that don't always reflect how Boston actually looks or lives today. So if you wanted to do something with your house, it's extremely hard to do many common projects such as add accessibility features like ramps, elevators, first floor living space to existing homes. They often require special approvals, even when they fit the neighborhood or your house has been here for, maybe hundreds of years, depending on the actual house that you have.
My house is 220 years old.
Yes, and I'm sure if you want to do anything to it right now, you would likely have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is not a great process for you to have to go through. It adds time and money for you to be able to do maybe minor improvements that you might need to be able to add to your house.
So would an example of zoning that would cover like how high a building is?
Correct.
And how close it can be to the building next to you?
Yes.
Okay.
How high you can go. Can you add something like a ramp to the front of your house? That would be, you would likely need a variance because you're now moving into the actual public realm or closer to it. So zoning reform is really kind of focused on modernizing and simplifying those rules so they better match both the existing conditions, so you don't actually have to go through that process, update it to reflect current planning goals and what the goals are for each different neighborhood. And the goal is really to make it easier and more predictable for anyone to improve their homes while still protecting kind of the neighborhood character, affordability, and kind of your quality of life.
And that's like really impactful for people with disabilities because Boston is an old city. We're approaching 400 years just a few years from now. And I always say that Boston, in addition to being an old city, we're a vertical city because we don't have a big footprint, so everything is built up. We're a winter city, so we always have to take into account climate resiliency and winter weather, cracking sidewalks and things like that. We're a very densely populated city, so everybody's right next to each other, right on top of each other. And I've heard people say that Boston probably wouldn't even get built today because of all the building code requirements and zoning requirements. So I'm really glad that zoning is being updated so that if people do want to add a ramp or another story on the house, maybe it will be easier and won't take so much of a delay. So that's great to know. Okay, can you talk a little bit about when there are large developments, what good things happen for the community? I know we talk a lot of times about community benefits, but if a developer is proposing like a major housing development or mixed use with business, how will that benefit the community in any way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when a new large development project is proposed in Boston, it goes through a public review process called Article 80, which is designed to gather community input early on and often throughout the process. First, what will happen is a developer will submit what's called a project notification form or a PNF, outlining to the city what they want to build. That's a very long document, but there are also chapters in it that if you want to go look at very quickly, there are things that you can go through pretty fast. This triggers a public notice and kind of kicks off the review. The planning department then works with the developer to kind of identify key issues and the groups and the neighbors who should be involved and reach out to. And we'll also do public meetings where there's a comment period where residents, community groups, and stakeholders, including people with disabilities and accessibility advocates, can ask questions and raise concerns and suggest changes. This input is especially important in shaping how projects kind of address accessibility, inclusive design, mobility, housing affordability, and access to transit and open space, and kind of how well a development works for people across the board. As a project evolved, the developer is then expected to respond to community feedback and revise the proposal. City staff evaluate whether the project aligns with kind of both adopted plans, zoning, citywide goals around equity, climate resilience, and public benefits. And then we'll make a decision approving with conditions or requiring further changes both based off of that review. And the goal is really just not to review a project, but shape it so it kind of better serves the community across the board. And a lot of the things that we hear from communities, how can we make the public realm better, right? Most people may never actually enter into one of these maybe multifamily homes, but they're going to walk by it all the time. So can we make the sidewalk wider? Can we improve a curb ramp that is around the corner because we know that it's one that is maybe not up to standard? Can we add a sidewalk so it's safer for people to cross the street? These are the types of things that community benefits and mitigation can actually be given from a developer to a project.
Thank you for that information. And I know you've referenced a few times a term called Article 80. I just want to let our viewers know that Article 80 is a piece of the development and planning process. It's basically a tool that developers have to use to ensure that they look at all the impacts of a development on traffic and light and shadow. And we implemented an accessibility checklist about 10 years ago now. So every development over 15 units, I believe Caitlin said, has to fill out this form, the accessibility checklist. And it asks things like, where is the accessible entrance? Will there be an elevator? Will you have accessible housing units? What floors will they be on? How many bedrooms will they have? Will there be accessible parking? And then we also ask about the public realm, which means the public property owned by the city that's outside of the development project. So there'd be things like Caitlin mentioned, sidewalks, curb ramps, intersections. And we want to ask the developers, because a lot of times they're big developers who do have the resources to improve the sidewalk. So you're going to build a big, huge, beautiful housing unit, but then the curb ramp on the sidewalk on the corner isn't going to be accessible. So that's not going to benefit anyone who lives there who may use a wheelchair. So we want to ask them to do things like that. So my staff works very closely with the planning department on things like this. And if our viewers want to get involved, you could really just pull out the Article 80 accessibility checklist and just read that. It's about 10 pages, and it gives you all the information on accessibility of any big development. So it's an easy way to kind of find out how the access is gonna be laid out throughout the whole development. And then just with a few minutes left, I did want to ask you to talk a little bit about how residents can get involved in any engagement opportunities that you have coming up, like writ large, to influence planning in general?
Yeah, we have a couple of things going on right now that are particularly tied to neighborhood planning and kind of citywide work. We have the Allston Brighton Community Plan. It's a major opportunity for residents and stakeholders to help shape long-term goals for the neighborhood. The next public engagement for that is going to be at the end of January. So if you are a resident of Allston Brighton, or if you go to Allston Brighton all the time, please show up to that. We're going to have lots of interesting recommendations for people to hear. And that will result in a plan that will get released in the spring. And then we'll also have rezoning across the board. And then another thing that we're going to be doing, which you guys should be on the lookout sometime this spring as well, is a citywide needs assessment. This is something that is super exciting and something that I'm going to be leading personally, which is a needs assessment using what we're calling an A to 80 lens with a strong focus on accessibility and inclusion for all people. So we want to make sure that every neighborhood across the city, that if you're 8 or if you're 80, that you have everything that you need within the neighborhood that you have. This work will evaluate whether neighborhoods provide accessible housing, safe and navigable streets, inclusive public spaces, and kind of the essential services that support people with disabilities, seniors, caregivers. And this assessment will really help identify those gaps and barriers to be able to help future planning and investment decisions across the board. And then lastly, we have the Neighborhood Housing Zoning Initiative, which is a citywide effort to modernize kind of small scale family zoning to better reflect the existing neighborhood and make it easier for you guys to actually update your homes that kind of better reflect the needs of those people who own them. And then additionally, there's lots of Article 80 projects that happen all of the time across the entire city that you guys are always welcome to comment on. And then I'll just do one last call to say that if you are not signed up for the planning department's newsletter, please do so. That is the best way for us to get all of the information out to all of you. You'll get emails for your neighborhood based off of Article 80 projects, community meetings that are coming on, disposition meetings that are coming on in your neighborhood. And if you are not someone who likes to use email, anytime that we have a public meeting, we also put we also notice in the local newspapers as well.
And what's the email address people should sign up for the information?
It is actually a link that you have to sign up. So I can send it to you if there's a way that we can put it in the chat,
Great.
guys.
Okay. And then if people want, they can always email us at disability@boston.gov.
Yeah, but if you go on bostonplans.org, that is the best way. It's right at the top for people to click on it.
Okay, bostonplans.org.
Yeah.
Or email disability@boston.gov, and you'll get all the information on development in your neighborhood and across the city. Well, I want to thank you so much, Caitlin, and you actually left us with a really good transition because the city also has a new tool called the City Project Tracker, and this is something that talks about development in your neighborhood in every way, every type of development that's happening, from streets and sidewalks to buildings to anything else that's happening. So I'm going to now throw it to my staff person, Sylvia Rosenkalt, who is our accessibility and inclusion training specialist. Sylvia's going to talk to us about this awesome new tool that the City of Boston recently launched. Sylvie, I'll send it to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hi, I'm Sylvie, the Disability Commission's Accessibility and Inclusion Training Specialist. Welcome to this episode of In the Know, where we will be talking about the city's new project tracker. So you just heard Commissioner mention the project tracker, but what is it? The project tracker is a website. It brings together information about all of the City of Boston-led construction projects. So libraries, schools, parks, and streets. If we're planning it, designing, or building something, you can find out about it on the tracker. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what this looks like. So if you go to boston.gov and scroll all the way to the featured resources, you will find View Projects across the City of Boston. That's what you want to click on. You will see all of the city's projects listed here on the project tracker. So right now that's 203 projects. That's a lot. It starts out in this list view, but you can also change it to map view if you want to look at a map of where the various projects are going on. But you might be wanting to understand what's going on in your neighborhood. So you can use these filters on the left-hand side to understand what's going on in your neighborhood. If you click neighborhood, you can check either one or multiple neighborhoods and then apply that. And you might find out what's going on in those neighborhoods. All of these features, filters will show up under the name of the project listed. So for example, if we look at Rogers Park, Phase 1, we can see that this is in the planning phase. We can see the location, the features, which is baseball, little league, softball. We can find out who to contact, that project manager that we were just talking about. If you want to send an email, you can do that directly from this website. You will also be able to sign up for email notifications about the project. So every city project has a community engagement component, excuse me. So that's why we want you to be in the know about this project tracker. The city wants to hear from you and wants to see your input about what you want in your local parks, on your streets, at your local BCYF centers, and more. This page is a quick and easy way to find many opportunities to influence the future of Boston, or just a great way to find out when you can expect the next park to open. So one last note about this page. You have also heard Caitlin talk about Article 80. It came up a couple times. Large projects that private developers are leading. So those projects are not listed on this tracker, but there is a link at the bottom of the page that will take you to a similar page that lists private projects. So we hope you'll pop over to boston.gov and learn more about all the work the city is doing to build and renovate public property into first-class amenities for the public. And we hope to see you at a community meeting now that you're in the know. Back to you, Colleen.
Thank you, Sylvie, for keeping us in the know. That is the end of this episode of Disability Access in Action. Please make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you can be the first to catch future episodes. And also, please subscribe to the City of Boston's Disabilities Commission weekly newsletter. You can do that at www.boston.gov/disability. Subscribe to stay informed about disability access and inclusion in the city. And thank you for watching. Until next time.